Welcome back, Wayfinders. Today I'm doing something a little bit different. Instead of time-lapsing my wood burn, like I usually do, listening to music, putting on a movie in the background, then editing out the sound, throwing in a little bit of sound, a little music, back into it, and then doing a lesson, I decided to just have a little chat. We'll talk a little bit about my background, why it is I do the things I do, where I came from, my home, my life that I grew up with, a lot about the cabin that I grew up in as well, and just get to know each other a little bit better. I've done 38 videos so far, mostly instructional. This one, you're not going to learn about any techniques or survival or homesteading. You're just going to learn a little more about me. So if you're here to do some product reviews, or if you're here to see how well the next fire starter performs, this might be a good video to skip. But if you're here to listen and be part of the community and discuss and find out a little bit more about Follow the Compass North and its origins, well, this might be exactly the video you're looking for. Now, I might talk a little bit slower in this one, not as enthusiastic or upbeat, not trying to create a viral video. I'm not trying to keep you engaged. I'm trying to wood burn some semi-straight lines while also following a train of thought, and that may be difficult. So there's going to be a little bit of rambling. There's probably going to be some digression, and that's okay, that's human. So where should we start? Obviously, I have a passion for all things wilderness, everything from the smell of the wood burning in front of me to fire making, camping, conservation, hunting, fishing, gathering, gardening, canning, homestead, and survival. And that's mostly due to my upbringing. I was raised by two individuals who built their cabin in the woods while attending college full time for as little money as they had, which was dozens and only dozens of dollars, a few $100s at most, over the course of 2 years. And those years were, and I might be off by a year or two because it's a little bit before me, was 1979 and 1980. That's what I'll go with. I fully expect some of my family members or siblings in the comments below to be like, it was 89 and 90. Well, that's about a decade off, so hopefully I'm not that far off. So we're going to go with 79 and 80, or somewhere thereabouts, about the time my older brother was born. The cabin was made in northern Michigan. It was a not cedar, a balsa tree cabin, a very straight looking log that peels very stickily but very easily when the logs are green. Now when the log dies, or the tree dies, suppose tree dies, turns into a log, doesn't matter. It's a little harder to peel, and it'll leave score marks as you draw the draw knife along it. So if you get them fresh and you peel them fresh, the bark slides right off. The extra sap and moisture is what makes that possible. And there's this iconic photo in my family's photo album of my very pregnant mother sitting atop a log, pregnant with my brother, and she's using a leaf spring off of an old Jeep that they had taken apart and sharpened the leaf spring, not the Jeep, into a makeshift draw knife. They'd used the square nut axle bolts. I think it was an old Willys Jeep, I'm not sure. Again, a little before my time, so I have to guess on some of the details. But in the picture, she's using this leaf spring to peel the logs. And these were logs that my grandpa and my father had gone back into the woods and selected and cut down and drug out of the woods with an old 1948, 1949 Farmall W4 tractor, which is still in the family and running today, largely thanks to my brother's restoration efforts. And so they dragged these logs out of the swamp, and they would set them up, and my mom would peel them with a sharpened leaf spring from a Jeep. So far, they've invested dollars. We've done all the labor themselves. They got the tools they needed, and when they didn't have the tools, they improvised. And improvisation is an important part of homesteading, an important part of creating a life for yourself. If you don't have it, you have to adapt and to overcome. We live in a culture these days where people see something that's broken, they tend to throw it away. And I've done it too. I'm not better. I've had things snap or break and they go straight in the garbage, and I go pick up a new one from Home Depot or from the hardware store or Joann's or whoever sells whatever implement it is that I'm using. But when you truly don't have anything, you have to create what you want or go without. Those are your only two options. There's an old saying that my dad used to say, and I love it, it goes, I've done so much with so little for so long that now I can do anything with nothing. And it's the power of adaptation and improvisation. It's always stuck with me. Like if you want a cabin, you make one. You go get the trees. If you have the property, we're lucky enough that Grandpa had the property. That is a resource. It's not like they had no resources. Grandpa had that property and had a chainsaw and a tractor. All big assets. But ones they borrowed. They didn't own. And so they pull these up with the borrowed tractor, with the borrowed chainsaw, and they'd peel the logs. And my dad was able to secure some old cinder blocks and some mortar. And he made a small foundation, shallow foundation, dug the sand out from in the middle, and didn't even have the boards to make a floor, but he had logs. So they began stacking the logs. One by one, they would drag it out, peel it, notch it, fit it, and stack it. In much the same way Richard Proenecke did in A Load in the Wilderness, but with the help of a chainsaw, which was making notching a lot faster, though the finishing work still has to be done by hand, and the marking has to be done by hand. And each weekend, when they weren't in class, they would drive out to this wilderness in the northern Upper Peninsula, or the deep north, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and they would add logs over the course of 2 years. When the cabin got too tall for them to lift the logs, they made a giant tripod with a lever and a block and tackle, and they built a crane that could move the logs up one at a time. One painstakingly multi-100-pound, maybe 1,000-pound log into position by hand in order to secure the future that they wanted. And when it came down to putting the roof on the cabin, my dad had saved enough money to buy some rolled roofing, not even enough to do shingles. And my grandpa had used the tractor to run a rotary wheel sawmill and cut boards for the roof. You can't create a nice snow shedding pitch with logs alone. So the trusses were made of log, built really well. They're still there, standing today. The cabin that I own now myself. And they added the boards that my grandpa built, or that my grandpa cut on the sawmill. And when I was growing up, we didn't have insulation. I would just look up above the bed and I'd see these boards. And I'd see the saw marks in them. A rough cut wheel sawmill. It was powered by the W4 tractor. Same tractor. Drug the logs, powered the mill, moved the snow, tilled the earth. One tool. For over 80 years in the family now, or approaching 80 years in the family. And it keeps going still. So he added the roof boards, and he added the rolled roofing. And as he was roofing it, this brand new looking cabin, even though they've been working on it for months and a year, a tourist stopped by. They was driving down the back roads of Michigan and saw this beautiful cabin, the beautiful woods. And he stops. He says, "Sir, can I ask you, how much did such a beautiful cabin cost you?" And he's a guy from, we call him a downstater, from the Lower Peninsula. And the downstater asked him, "Where did you, how much did you pay for this beautiful cabin?" Because it was gorgeous. All fresh wood cut. And as the roof went on it, my dad laughed and he said, "Oh, I've got about $600 in her." To this day, my dad, who just recently turned 70, tells that story with such pride. I love it. And growing up, it was just a story. Just an example of Dad being funny, which is one of his favorite pastimes. And it kind of left a mark on me. I'd say just a family story, but really think about it in life. It's that kind of spirit that was passed down. That you don't need money. You need a lot of money to be happy. If you have any money, you have big problems, right? We've lived that life before. I've lived the life of poverty, of counting your ramen noodles and wondering which utility you need shut off first. And anyone who says you don't need money to be happy, or all the cliches, maybe they haven't really experienced real struggle. So yes, I respect real struggle. I know what it's like. I've been there. But you don't need much to find happiness. Now again, I respect that they had a tractor and a chainsaw and these big, somewhat unachievable tools for some people, and that helps a lot. But finding joy and happiness in a beautiful summer day, or the smell of autumn, of crisp leaves smoldering in the yard, or of just crisp leaves unburnt, falling from the trees, and the cool rolling wonder that is fall. Well, that's free. And to experience that from a rustic log cabin, that's freeing. Excuse me, I'll turn this around. I'm adding the arrows here because every time I play this, it seems like people get confused. It's a 4-lane cribbage board, and instead of doing 2 laps on a single lane, you just follow it around, continue towards the inside, as both players race towards the last hole, 121st hole. So I'm trying out, so I know it's non-standard, I'm trying out adding arrows to help people along and follow them and make it a little less confusing, especially after you've had a drink or two socially as you play cribbage with your friends. So where was I? $600 cabin. Now over the years you add more to it, and electricity was added and windows were gifted My, I think it was either my uncle or my dad had seen somebody who was getting all new windows, high efficiency windows put into their nice house somewhere up there on the lake, I believe. I may be getting some of these details inaccurate. But there was a house getting new efficient windows put in, and all these old windows were stacked up on the curb, and the holes in the cabin had not been cut yet. And the funny thing with the cabin is that the whole thing's structural. You can put a window almost anywhere, and you're not going to compromise the wall, compromise the load-bearing structure. As long as you leave a couple logs overhead as a header, it'll be stronger than any stick-built house that you have today. It's practical beams. They might have a little bit of sway to them in the cold or when moisture hits. You might have a gap or two form over the years that needs chinking, but a log cabin is darn strong. So when Dad was able to get these windows secondhand, completely free from the individuals throwing them away, and he asked before taking them, he didn't just go to a construction site and start taking windows. That's liable to make you a little less free than you are. Took the windows, and he cut each window to size in the cabin to match the windows that he had. So if you look closely, and most people can't even tell, a few of the windows are slightly different sizes. And because all the holes were cut perfectly to fit said windows, they all look uniform. It's an interesting trick of the eye. I eventually will have to replace them with high efficiency, just like the person did before them, probably giving these windows some sort of separation anxiety after being abandoned over and over again. A little personification of hardware, but hey, makes me happy. And we'll add nicer windows to that place and maybe shore them all up to be the same size. Maybe that'll help my OCD a little bit. I shouldn't say OCD. My particular brain, to me, it's not a disorder. I just have I like organization. I like things to be equal. It doesn't cause issues for me like it can for others, so I won't be insensitive. So we got the windows, and I remember, even though I'm the youngest of four, I remember we used to have a ladder in the living room that would lead upstairs. And I loved that ladder, and I remember they never wanted me to climb it because I was very young enough to not be negotiable with what I wanted and what they wanted, like any child. I remember wanting to go up that ladder, and I could only go up it once, and I had to go to bed. And they would finally let me up it, and I was all excited, and I'd go up it, and I'd be like, ah, crap, it's bedtime. So I loved to climb it, but it meant I needed to go to sleep. So, well, there's a trade-off. I don't always remember how it turned out. I probably threw a fit or two. I was the youngest, thought I was the favorite. Maybe I was. A little entitled, a little full of myself, I'm sure. But I remember there being a ladder in the living room next to the old barrel stove. And if you're not familiar with barrel stoves, it's literally just a barrel that has had a chimney welded onto it, and a door welded onto it, and feet welded onto it. And you light the fire in it, you burn it until it starts having holes in it, and then you get another barrel. And you take the hardware off, and if you got good hardware, it bolts on, doesn't weld. Unbolt it. Bolt it onto another barrel, and you burn that one. And it's just one step up from a hobo fire. But it works really well, and it gets really hot. And I remember the metal being red hot, them not wanting me to touch it, which I did. And I have the scars to prove it, my hands and elbows. That's another story. But there's a ladder led upstairs. The exciting ladder. The ladder to the unfinished attic, which was actually supposed to be a finished second floor. No insulation, no safety rails. You could actually climb over top of the dining room and look down into people playing cards late into the night with the darkness outside and the snow falling in front of the spotlight. And you could watch the adults from over the dining room down through the ceiling fan. You could watch them play pinochle, double-deck pinochle, which I'd never understood and I never played. I'm sure I could now. It just always felt like an adult game, and I guess I've never gotten to the point in life where I felt like an adult. And I'd sit up there in this unfinished attic with roofing nails sticking through the boards, where if you raise your head up too fast, you gave your scalp a good piercing with the edge of a roofing nail, overlong roofing nail protruding through the board, no insulation, so it was just board and then shingles when I was older, rolled roofing when I was younger. Either way, you're liable to pierce yourself on those nails. So I'd be careful about that. And I remember the knots in the logs looking like faces, and I would try to find them, and I found ones that looked like monkeys staring at me. One was very creepy, so creepy that my mom had to chop it up with a hatchet because it would keep me awake. And I would be up in that little attic, and I'd watch out for the big hole in the floor, which was unfinished, where the ladder came up from the living room. And that wooden ladder was made of 2x4s. My dad had notched 2 long 2x4s and dropped cross rungs in it. A standard home-built 2x4 construction. I'm sure I'll whip one up on this channel eventually and show how to do it. It's quick, it's fast, it's safe, it's strong. I'm sure it's not up to OSHA standards, but nothing was at one point. And so I'd watch them and I'd fall asleep up in my second story of the log cabin. And I loved it. I loved it up there. And when you didn't have enough insulation, the trick was to have a really hot fire. And that barrel stove could do it. It pumped out real heat. Later, we would attempt to change it out for a more efficient stove. And it would have difficulty heating the house. And then insulation would have to be installed, when really just a red hot barrel stove was enough for years. And preferences got in the way of meeting your needs with soapstone stoves and whatnot. But all things have to come to an end. And even now today there's a buck style stove sitting in that cabin, which I've been slowly remodeling just over the last few years since I've got it in my name, and increasing the insulation and putting on real roofing and slowly building, not fixing so much as completing. For me, and I know I'm not following the timeline here, for me, working on that cabin is therapeutic. It's taking a project that I love, I've always loved, and making it better. Putting in running water close to the stove so it doesn't freeze. Running PEX pipes so when they do freeze they don't shatter, because you never know. Fixing electrical and upgrading systems and adding stoves and redoing the kitchen, fixing things that break along the way. I've been doing all this lately, and it's been one of the greatest experiences of my life, taking a place that I love so much and making it better and better. And each time we go up there, it's a little bit better. Now my homestead that you'll see on this channel pretty extensively once we move back to the United States and run it full time, looking like, if everything stays on track, September of 2026, we'll be going full time to Michigan. And right now we're hopping around different countries, trying to spread the knowledge that I have and finish out a good, solid career that I love. I mean, more on that later. That's another story as well. But fixing that place when I have time off and when I take vacations with the family is it's one of the greatest things I've done in my life. I wake up there at 6 a.m. and I am ready to roll. I am excited for the day. I just want to do things. I want to split firewood and clear trails and drive a Ranger and mow the lawn and fix leaks and repair and remove rotted logs and replace them. And I want to work. I want to work hard. And I'm not always like that. There's days when I'm doing normal day-to-day work where I wake up and I just want to go back to bed. Not always extremely motivated. We're all human. But it is hard not to be motivated when you're in the place you belong. So the homestead's just down the road. The homestead is unlike the log cabin. The log cabin is rustic and pure, and every bit of it, I watched it grow, and it is something that is a part of me. The cabin will always be one of my favorite places in the entire universe. And the homestead down the road has merit as well. My grandfather built it on the same property, using the same sawmill, logs from the same place, but it's a beam-built, timber-framed house. So the walls are square and flat, not of log. They've been trimmed by the mill, and he's taken his time with it. Great big beams burst through the front of the house, and it really makes a beautiful statement. He went with a very Scandinavian look, and it's absolutely gorgeous, and there's an incredible amount of craftsmanship that went into that place. And I do love it. That is my home. That is where we will all live. And it is more modern. It's got all the nice appliances and better electrical, better insulation, better heating. And that is my house, my lodge, my home. And I still work on it. Put in new cedar ceilings, put in new kitchen, trying to customize as much as I can, building the furniture in our own shop with wood that we cut down and ran through the new sawmill as we learn to create a homestead. And it's beautiful. And it'll always have a strong place in my heart. But, however, the cabin is magical to me. I'm about $10,000 and a couple hundred hours of labor away from having it perfect. And I'm sure that's been said before. That was said in 1989. I'm sure it was said in 1980. And every year since, it's like, oh, we could do it. But it's kind of got this beautiful value where it's never done. It's never enough. And it gets better and better and better. And there's always more potential. It's almost like a life. No matter how great you make it, you'll be surprised to find out that it could be better. You can make it. You can improve it. And there's something to be said for contentment. And if I can ramble and give life lessons from a 32-year-old, which is laughable, there's something to be said for contentment, of finding the place where it's supposed to be. But there's also something to be said for driving forward and improving. And you got to find that balance where you're happy, but you're also progressing and not growing stagnant. Unless you're content, if you're 100% happy being stagnant, well, more power to you. You're probably one of the happiest people in the world. But I find that when I'm stagnant and I feel that I'm content with it, deep down I want progress. I want to keep going. I want to improve. I want to learn. I want to do more. And that's one of the reasons why I have so many hobbies. Everything from tattooing and wood burning to auto and metalworking and woodworking and survival and hunting, fishing, gathering. I listed a bunch in the beginning. They're all all hobbies. A friend of mine who watched me build a cedar chest for someone's retirement. He said, "You're a jack of all trades and a master of some." And I do appreciate the twist of the common cliche there. I won't lie, it makes me feel pretty good, because it is good to hone your skills. I'm a strong advocate of that. As you might be able to tell as you watch the channel, learn more about me and the homestead and how we like to do things. And I keep a lot of it quiet. I don't spread around my name or location too much here. You won't find it on the site or linked to the profile, because there's also something to be said about living a life without an audience. Everyone these days is a performer with social media, and it's sometimes it's nice to sit back and have a snow leopard moment, as they would say in Walter Mitty, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. A surprisingly inspiring film with Ben Stiller. And now I am rambling. I knew as soon as I'd get to these other detail works where I couldn't zone out as easily, I might go off on a tangent. So that cabin was built well before I could remember, but it was still being built when I was a child. So that staircase had to go. Oh, that ladder, which was our staircase, I suppose, had to go. And one day, my dad ushered my mom out into the front yard, and she goes, and I go, "Everybody come on, come here, you have to go." And she goes, "Jeff, what is it? What's coming?" He's like, just wait. And we hear a truck coming down the road. It's one of my uncles who had a construction business and was able to get his hands on a beautiful steel and wood spiral staircase. And he comes down the road with that on the trailer, and he's beeping and he's waving and everyone's celebrating. And it was it was the homecoming of the last piece, the last major piece. And everybody was ecstatic. We had a bonfire going. We had good food. We were sweating and taking apart the staircase and putting it back together inside and cutting it to fit and adjusting it and tweaking it and looking at it and sitting back and wondering and making more ice water while we're trying to figure out how to do it right. And granted, I wasn't really a decision maker at that time, but it turned out pretty great. That spiral staircase leads up right next to the old barrel stove, and they encased it in beautiful cedar handrails plucked right out of the woods. We just went back into the woods and found some twisted cedar and made it better. Peeled it down and kept it raw, and it was, Dad said, every time you walk by this staircase, you pick at the cedar a little bit. It's got a whole bunch of hairs hanging off of it from the bark. And so every time I went by that cedar, I'd pick off a couple hairs. And over time, it became this beautiful, slick staircase, handrail. Like I said, I'm going to misspeak a few times. I'm going to zone out a few times because I'm multitasking. It's not my forte. I remember that staircase going in, and Mom wanted to paint it green. And Dad was like, "Green? It's a log cabin." But as with a lot of things, she won the argument. It did end up green eventually. She's an incredibly patient woman. And grew my respect for powerful women, I suppose. It's nice to, I find that if you have a partner or a person or a friend who is powerful and still chooses you to be their friend or their partner or their person, their spouse, boyfriend or girlfriend, the more powerful they are, the bigger the compliment it is. They decided it was you they wanted to spend their time with. I'm a strong advocate of that, whether it's male or female. Have a strong partner. It's the best advice I can give you. I suppose if you're this far into the film, probably 35, 36 minutes at this point, and you're still listening to me, you're either trying to sleep or you enjoy my storytelling. So thank you, either way. I suppose if you're unconscious, you won't hear it, but if you're still here with me and still listening, make sure you have a strong partner in life. There's nothing more validating than looking at the person you love and going, they picked me. They could have anyone in the world. This powerful, amazing person decided that I was the best option. And that is one heck of a way to live your life. So we installed the staircase, and the cabin came in very beautifully. And it was, like I said, never quite finished. Probably never will be, despite my best efforts, I'm sure. It'll always be a cabin. And I say that, you're like, yeah, of course, you've been talking about this whole time. It's a cabin. We get it. But to me, the word means something different. My parents called it the Nook of the North. Their little oasis. A place to get away. They didn't call it oasis, it's just the metaphor I'm using. The Nook of the North, the cabin, a magical place built by my father and my mother for hundreds, and then investing eventually thousands, and soon investing tens of thousands to make it perfect. Now the upstairs is insulated and finished with sawn boards, rough sawn boards from my own sawmill. I'm using a more modern gas-powered band sawmill, not a tractor, which is, I guess, is gas-powered too. Tractor-powered rotary blade mill. Mine's a little more modern, a little more efficient. Smaller blade kerf allows you to get more boards out of your log and have less waste. And I used that sawmill one of my first projects in that sawmill was to create the boards to finish the upstairs of the cabin. And it was quite a few board feet, so it was a good starting project for me. They're not perfect. I've made mistakes. I used a dull blade for far too long and made some waves. You can see where a dull or broken tooth left stray marks in the boards. But it adds to the beauty, rustic nature of the place. But beneath that is absolutely store-bought fiberglass insulation nailed in between the logs because well, you can't make everything. To contradict myself. Yes, there's ways to do insulation. Yes, you could have shredded and created dead air space or layered space, and there's a lot of different ways we could have created that type of insulation. But man, does blown in or fiberglass or spray foam insulation, man, does that make that easy? And I have a little bit more free capital than my parents did when they're building it, so I can upgrade these things. You're buying convenience, really, and that's okay. It's okay to focus what you want. And I didn't want to make insulation. Alright, I'm going to try to do a spiral on this end. See if I can pull it off. Might take a little bit of concentration. So the upstairs is insulated and boarded. and has a much nicer feel to it now. It's not the feel that I grew up with, but it is nice. And it, ooh, I just broke the little, when you break the little chip off the end of these things, they start burning really, really well. They stop having such good insulation. I have to go a little faster, or it's going to look uneven. I think we have enough room to do another half spiral on this and go from there. It's okay if this isn't perfect. I knew that when I didn't sketch it out and I just started doodling, that it was going to be something unique. And here we are. Now, I should have stopped the spiral already, but it's okay. I'll do like a little doodle on here. So the upstairs is rustically done. A bunch of beds up there now for when people come visit. They have a place to stay. The downstairs I've been remodeling and adding more modern appliances and modern fixtures, working on plumbing, doing plumbing properly. The place had some rudimentary plumbing in the past. Now we're getting it set up. In fact, this last summer was the first time I was able to go down to the cabin, work all day on it, and take a hot shower. It was almost an emotional experience, taking that first hot shower down there. Going, we did it. We made this place into a proper house, which as a cabin it doesn't have any right to be, but it is very useful since it's going to be our guest house. If we do any kind of collabs or whatever, that's where we'll have our other rustic friends stay, in the house that I grew up in. I think that's beautiful. Be a cool little tidbit to add on to it. I'm going to thicken up a few of these lines as I wrap up here. I remember when, speaking of emotional experiences with the... Ooh, let that one on fire. When it gets too hot, it burns the smoke, lights it on fire, which is okay, but it leaves burn marks around it. And depending on what you're going for, it could be a nice aesthetic, but it'd be a new aesthetic, and not what I've been doing this whole time, so let me pay a little more attention to that. So we have an emotional experience with the plumbing. The first time that happened was when we got our plumbing going, and I think it was 1999. I was 11 years old. Yes, that puts me at 88, if you're trying to track. 11 years old in 1999, and we got our toilet installed. And the whole family, and by got our toilet installed, I mean we installed a toilet. We went and bought a toilet and bought all the plumbing and dug a septic field and buried it in gravel and hay and sand and worked our butts off and buried a 1,000-gallon tank. That actually got unloaded by a crane on a truck, so that was kind of nice. And we installed the toilet and we ran water to it with a pressure tank, and we got the well pump put down into a well that was, we did have the well dug professionally, and we turned it all on and the toilet tank filled up. So the first pieces of running water we had when I remember it was summer, so I must have been 11 already. So I was 11 and we turned that on and the toilet filled up, and Dad reached over and he flushed it, and the whole family erupted in joy because we had a flushing toilet in the cabin. We didn't have to walk out to the outhouse, which was our primary means of evacuation, if you catch my drift. At that point, you'd have to trudge out there in the snow, in the cold, with a cold seat and cold toilet paper, and make it work, which is fine. But when we had that flushing toilet, it was a big deal. Just like when we had the hot shower this last summer. It was a big deal. And it's been nothing but those feelings as you make your life a little bit better each time. As I live in the lodge down the street that my grandpa built, less than a quarter mile away on the same property. And I wake up to a warm house, and I run my laundry, and cook food on the stove, and wash dishes in a dishwasher. Because I do live in 2021 these days. And I partake of all the modern conveniences. It is still a victory to go down the street and run hot water at that place. And there's more to come. This isn't the end of the story. I'm halfway through remodeling that place. But what I wanted to do today is talk a little bit more about me and where I came from. And it seemed right to tell the story about where the cabin came from first. Because it was in those logged walls. It was in those log walls that I discovered my passion for the wilderness, where I read Henry David Thoreau, where I read Gary Paulson, where I survived in Hatchet, and I ran sled dogs in the Iditarod and Dog Song and Wind Song, where I survived inside of a great redwood tree, my side of the mountain. All those adventures in the forest, while in the forest, gave me a great passion for the wilderness and an appreciation for the wild. And my parents started that. They decided to build that cabin and read Mother Earth News and try to make apple cider with a snowmobile engine. That is a true story, but one for another wood burning. But that's where I developed the why behind me in that location, in those woods in the great north. As the snow fell and the cold came into the walls, and we fought it off with a barrel stove, as Mom read us stories at night, and candles burned low, with no running water, nowhere to be. Have a nice book in your hand, and family nearby. No distractions. It's a beautiful life. So I'm going to be doing more of these wood burnings and talk more about my history and tell stories. I've got a few funny ones, the skunk fridge and a few similar ones. You can't live in the woods and not have a few run-ins with wildlife. And those are for a future time. And there'll be some more solemn ones too, about the dogs and the bears. And of my grandfather trying to survive up there on his own, his tenacity, and how each generation of my family has tried to survive on that property, going back 4 generations, and how we're trying to succeed now, setting ourselves up for the 2026 move, permanent move into the homestead. This channel is going to be watching all of it for years to come. I'll tell the stories of the past while we create the stories of the future, for the future, in the present, and walk you along the whole time. We'll document this. It's going to be a beautiful, grand adventure. I'm looking forward to it. And I'll throw in some of my life thoughts and lessons along the way. If people find it valuable, great. If not, that's okay. We're all on different walks of life. The lessons I learned in a log cabin in the snow may not be the lessons that you need to get your resort in Belize or your timeshare in Cancun or your vineyard in France, whatever your goals are, location built or not. It's nice to have you along for the ride. I'm not expecting a lot of people to make it through this whole approaching 50-minute video. But if you did, thank you for watching. the views here are always motivating, whether it's one or whether it's 1,000. It's lovely. Have you guys here working with me, making comments, liking and subscribing. Obviously we enjoy that. Really helps us get out there. And I try to pump it in every video, but then you sound like every other person on YouTube. Like, subscribe, and share. It does make a difference. So if you did enjoy it, yes, please do. But I'm not going to try to turn this into a channel where we're constantly pumping ourselves out there. The purpose of this is to document this beautiful journey and hopefully bring others along. Maybe get some advice along the way. We don't know everything. So it started in the cabin, and now I'm 7,543 miles away, approximately, from the cabin, wood burning, and talking to a camera about how I will get back there. Because this is our motto for Follow the Compass North. Inveniam viam aut faciam. I will find a path, or I will make one. So thank you for coming along on the journey here today with me. I do appreciate your company. Truly, I love you all. Stay tuned for the next wood burning. Watch for some of our product reviews. And I hope you enjoyed along the way. Have a great evening.